Welcome everybody to a new edition of UFO Man Live. My name is Tim, or UFO Man, and to my right is my friend, my co-host, Tommy Highway. Tommy?
Hey folks, Tommy Highway here. I want to thank everybody for coming out. As always, we have a fantastic show for you this evening with a very special guest. Folks, his name is Dan Willis. He's former U.S. Navy, and in 2001, he was part of the National Press Club UFO disclosure event. He's a UFO researcher and an expert on suppressed technologies, folks. We're talking about things that were either given to us from who knows where or that were actually collected as part of UFO debris. He's also a witness to a USO encounter while on active duty with the U.S. Navy in 1969. Folks, he also has his own website that's called thewebmatrix.net. It is our honor and my great pleasure to bring you Mr. Dan Willis. Dan, welcome aboard.
Tim, Tommy, thanks for inviting me on. It's great to be on your show.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
Coming. Hey, Dan, we're going to start out with a little question for you, which is, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
My background, I don't have a long military career. It was only 4 years in the Navy. When I was in the Navy, I worked at the U.S. Naval Communication Station in San Francisco. It was a major communication hub. Because of that, you have top secret messages. So it required me to have a high-level top secret security clearance. So I had a top secret crypto level 14 extra sensitive material handling security clearance. I worked in the code room, which is kind of a backup for the teletype. This is 1969, and when you have atmospheric conditions, the signal doesn't get through; it gets gibberish, and so you have to have Morse code, that type of thing. So I took this one message from a ship off the coast of Alaska that was the sailors reported coming off port bow a disc that was about 70 feet in diameter that was glowing reddish orange, merged out of the ocean, and the radar operator trapped the blips on it going over 7,000 miles per hour. This was secret classified, priority level, going to the Chief of Naval Operations in Washington, D.C. This is what seeded my interest all the way back in 1969. And since that time, I've been researching, and my background is I worked with the government for many years in electronics engineering and Naval Electronic Engineering Center. I was a broadcast engineer, most powerful FM station on the West Coast. I've done a lot of different things over the years. It was in 2001 that I was asked to join 20 witnesses that were willing to testify under oath before the mainstream media of the world at the National Press Club. That's me, the only guy in the gray suit. At least it was in fashion, it was May. And what we were disclosing should have been a world-changing event. We're talking about bases on the other side of the moon, 57 different species already categorized. We've had faster-than-light craft built back in the 1950s, ICBM, nuclear silos being completely shut down, multiple succession, all the nukes being shut down. Future false flag events like terrorists being next. This was May of 2001. We all know what happened in September of 2001. My God, presidents, CIA directors being denied access, that we had 0-point energy. We had the scientists within these black projects willing to prove it before an open congressional hearing, which the Bush administration denied, that we don't need nuclear, oil, or coal. Afterward, I saw myself being an ex-ABC newsman, I couldn't imagine. The place was packed with reporters, largest event in the history of the National Press Club. 22 cameras in the back row. Reporters are asking everybody questions. How could the information, these witnesses that breaking national security oaths that were willing to testify under oath, that's penalty of perjury, before an open congressional hearing we're seeking. How could these 20 witnesses, backed by over 500 military intelligence, we can fit 20 of them in there, how could this not be a world-changing event? I didn't know in 2001 what Operation Mockingbird was. And so the intelligence community control the mainstream media, as all of us are becoming more and more aware of. And what they did was they did a limited hangout, which they made it sound as though you have hundreds of witnesses and these people willing to testify on oath. For what? They want to have a congressional hearing on the reality of UFOs, but omitting all of the kind of damning evidence that our government's been infiltrated by these illegal operations, and that we've had solutions that could help the world. Afterward, CBS did a one-on-one interview with me, and I said, I saw what CNN did, and I said, I'm only willing to do this unless I can say a little short 10-second statement. And that is, we have scientists that can prove we have a solution to get off nuclear oil and coal, with 0-point energy. They promised, flew down from LA, interviewed me for 45 minutes. Afterward, the producer, she said, I never had this happen before. The higher executives, read CIA, never, they made it cut that part out. And so the only thing I got to say on CBS is we've reached a critical point where the truth needs to be revealed to the public, but that truth never got out. So so for the last 20 years, that was over 20 years ago, can you believe it? I've been researching, and it was all because of a media company out of Hollywood wanted me to write, being an ABC newsman and a witness, write an article for them about the control of the media in regards to the UFO matter. And so I gladly accept it. And the only way I could figure this out is to plug in from the year 1900 to present day and start plugging in. I was aware of all these witness testimonies, plugging them in, and I've discovered many classified documents, plugging them in along the timeline. And as you start to put this timeline of events and witness testimonies over an expansive time, after a while, you find out that what you learned in school and what the television, reveals to you is a whole nother reality going on behind the scenes that, what happened at the end of World War II, what infiltrations happened, what control of our perceptions happened, what plans were made. Anyway, I became very aware, and that's why, the UFO extraterrestrial issue is kind of the gateway into understanding what's been going on really in the world behind the scenes.
Right. Tommy?
Absolutely agree. We know, or can at least really strongly infer, that there has been all kinds of technology that we've actually been able to derive from, for instance, crashed alien technology. Tim and I have talked about this at length on other shows, but when you look at as a species, our progression of how we've come from the vacuum tube to the printed circuit in one generation, it just seems like, logically speaking, there should be a step or two in between there. Also, we're talking about, according to Philip Corso, medical instruments. We're talking about fiber optics, things of that nature. So I wanted to get your thoughts on, what exactly do you think is that some of the more useful things that are being suppressed, other than, of course, 0-point energy? Other technologies.
Well, energy situation, I have 10 years of experience, because after the Bush administration denied the congressional hearing, Dr. Stephen Greer, who organized the National Press Club event, he had a database of about 300 scientists and inventors, and I volunteered as one of 6 technical advisors. Everybody had multiple PhDs, and for 10 years I flew around the planet meeting with scientists and inventors and vetting these technologies that claim to be over unity. I mean, it goes back to the year 1996 when the CIA director, William Kobe, was going to get Dr. Greer this zero-point energy device that was extraterrestrial derived, along with $50 million to get it out to the world. But what happened was 1 week before that was going to happen, the CIA director ruled a boating accident, floating face down on the Potomac River. And so we really keep a lid on this thing. Going back to the Invention Secrecy Act of 1951, anybody that and there's a secret system within the patent office. I don't know if it's still active or not, but it's been for many decades, called the Sensitive Application Warning System. Well, anybody that's got, free energy, anti-gravity, super conductivity at room temperature, any of these game-changing technologies, what happens is it automatically issues what's called a national security order. And what this, and I've met with many scientists that have received these, and they cannot reveal their information under, penalty of imprisonment. It says that your invention has been deemed to be a detriment to the national security of the United States. Therefore, you cannot share it with anyone. And you have to give names of anybody that you shared it with. So we have probably well over 6,000, across the board, medical, energy, anti-gravity, solutions. Our planet's pretty much technologically hijacked. I mean, I could go over the 10 years of experience. I mean, the nightmares, people suicided. Dr. Greer, my fiance and I, we flew to Virginia and we set up a laboratory. We met with a lot of these scientists that could prove their technologies. And, one had a energy device down in the Dominican Republic. I flew down with Professor Ted Loiter. It was 1 watt going in, 500 watts coming out of this energy device. And when I got there, the inventor said, 2 agents showed up at his door. They told him, "This works, you're dead." And so he completely disassembled it. My job was to completely schematic it, blueprint it out, send it out through multiple different carriers in case we get whacked on the way back. Anyway, it's just a long horror story of they definitely keep a lid on technologies. And now we have, I'm one of the old witnesses, regular stuff. And then in the beginning of the 21st century, you start having people with total memory recall of their 20 years of service in the secret space program. And they're talking about incredible technologies, replicators. There you go. Med beds that people lose their arm or leg and they regenerates it within a matter of hours. I mean, this would completely dismantle our entire corrupt medical system, of pharmaceuticals. My great-grandfather was going up against Rockefeller. He was the president of Homeopathic Medical Society, where they were shutting down anybody that's coming up with anything that goes against the profits of the pharmaceutical industries. And, hopefully more gets exposed. And God, wouldn't it be wonderful to have these technologies out for the entire human race to be able to benefit?
And we've heard for decades that there's a heck of a lot more profit in treatment than there is a cure for just about anything. And that's really the way the pharmaceutical companies, I think that's their mentality. What are your thoughts on that, Tim?
Yeah, medical company, all medical companies on the planet, in my opinion, are corrupt.
They're all for profit.
Yeah, they're all for profit and they change statistics and everything to fit their needs. I think that there are people behind the scenes that are controlling the narrative. And according to what I read on your thewebmatrix.net site, um, there is a cabal that is actually controlling the narrative. And if I'm correct in saying this, back in Project Paperclip after World War II, when the Germans came over and the German scientists and the other German leaders were brought over to the United States, they infiltrated our country in several different areas, including the deep state. And they're the ones controlling the narrative on disclosure and on these inventions. They're part of the cabal. Is that correct, Dan?
Exactly correct, Tim. Yeah, exactly correct. They, across the board, they had a plan before the end of the war. They were researching the psychology of the American public. They know that we were very easily manipulated with fear, and that what they had was a plan, Weltanschauungskrieg, which as German translates to worldview warfare. They planned to infiltrate into the United States. Yeah, victory. We won the war with Germany, right? But the the SS and the rest all completely escaped, and through paperclip, we had 1,600 of the former doctors doing in Germany. You can't say certain words, be careful here. And they brought 1,600 of those people into the CDC, and they planned to control the mainstream media, which they did with Operation Mockingbird. And also the Bilderberg groups control that along with the Council of Foreign Relations and Trilateral. And they also, with Project Dove with Hollywood, controlled the education, which they did in 1946 with the Rockefeller Foundation. They completely rewrote the history. You think that would be illegal, of what happened at the end of World War II. So what they did was they created it's called a matrix of perception. So generational indoctrination, as you're born into this, what you learn in school, what you see on TV, the science fiction movies and so forth, forms your reality. Of completely, it's like a Truman Show kind of thing, where you have these incredible, this other world that is beyond what you would see in science fiction, that has been developing, going back, to the 1930s, 40s, and then they have just, the science and things that they have. You can imagine working with advanced races that are thousands or even millions of years in advance of us, and understanding who we are, what the matrix is that we're in, and the science of it, such as the holographic med beds. What's interesting was in the mid 70s, I had a unusual ET experience that related to geometry and consciousness, that put a burning passion in me. I was like totally new about what the matrix is and how this relates to water and quartz crystals. And I sought out the one scientist that was still working for IBM, Dr. Marcel Vogel, who set up a laboratory researching these exotic sciences. And one of the devices we imported from England was this camera called the Delaware camera that could take a drop of blood. And I mean, it was an amazing device. It used sound and light. It oscillated, and it goes a lot more complicated than this. I'm making it very simplified, but it basically projected into 3 angles a holographic projection in space, and they were able to capture it on film. And not only that, but they were able to tune backwards and forwards into time. And I done a show recently talking about this because I heard Alex Collier talking about how from the Andromedas, they shared with him how the med beds work. And what they do is they take a holographic picture of you, because everything's holographic in the universe. And that picture has within it the component of time that goes all the way back to your conception. And so what they do, they're able to go through slides and I mean, this is amazing advanced technology that can pick the different aspects of your body when all the different aspects of your body were optimal, and then they combine that into a hologram, they overlay that onto you, and it instantly maybe within a few hours or so anyway, transforms you. This is how the 20 and back programs work. They're able to take somebody in when they're 17 years old, put them on a separate timeline, the 20 years tour of duty in space, and then they time regress and age regress back to the point of enlistment. So you don't even skip a beat, and they erase your memory, right? And then as 20 years go by on this timeline, people start having total memory recall of their services. And I'm sure you guys have interviewed a number of these secret space program witnesses, all having similar experience where they're starting to recall starting out with Michael Ralph. He was one of the first. They started the program back in the 1980s. So what's 1980 to 2000? So he came out in the year 2000, and Randy Kramer, and was having total memory recall. And so there's so many. Tony Rodriguez, very many. Michael Gerloff. So yeah, Andy Pisaggio. He wasn't in the secret space program, but he was in the Project Pegasus, where they were working with jump rooms. I mean, this is stuff that Tesla was developing way back when, and just got totally classified. And my dear friend Naira, she got the bad end of the deal, like Tony, and did some slave labor on the moon, and went on board a craft where who was a reptilian on board, Emery Smith, working underneath Kirkland Air Force Base, many levels, working alongside extraterrestrials, doing. He was a surgical medical technician. And my dear friend Laura Eisenhower, they almost recruited her through a jump room to Mars. And we have the head of the Israeli space program talking about these underground facilities on Mars, and having joint extraterrestrial, military operations, and that there's a galactic federation.
Is that a Shed? Is his last name was Shed? The Israeli guy?
That's the gentleman. Yeah, very, very highly credible individual talking about the Galactic Federation. Then we find that you have Leslie Stevens, who was the creator of Outer Limits, that Gene Roddenberry was on his set, and his father was Admiral Leslie Stevens, deeply connected in the Office Naval Intelligence Psychological Operations, who was a contemporary with Admiral Rick Oboda, who was working with the 29 Navy spies, embedded into, they were trying to catch up. The Third Reich was way ahead of us. And so, William Tompkins was disseminating this information to universities and corporations that are trying to figure this stuff out from the Navy spies. But what's fascinating is that Gene Roddenberry was given, through the Office of Naval Intelligence, working with the Galactic Federation, the script for Star Trek, which seeded into millions of minds this positive timeline. Hollywood is so powerful in that each of us is like a fractal of a larger collective mind. And what we see on television it forms our perceptions. And so if you have millions of minds all thinking about something, like like the Captain Kirk's communicator, with the old flip phones, and they're talking about warp drives and teleportation and all these concepts that were like totally new back then, were being seeded in by the Galactic Federation. And today we've got people who have received implants and that are getting communications from the Galactic Federation about the operations that are going. Supposedly, I have no way of verifying this, but the Galactic Confederation, different from the Galactic Federation of Worlds, has a huge armada of craft hanging out near Jupiter, and they all come to watch the show. From what I understand, is the Dark Cabal, on this planet is basically at the end of its reign, and that they've agreed to a surrender, and they'll be taken through a portal in Antarctica to another galaxy in a prison planet far, far away, and unable to come back. And that would be such a glorious day. It'd be like such a celebration on Earth, because these people have manipulated our media and manipulated our education, kept our planet technologically hijacked for so many decades.
I've heard that CERN, the massive collider, is actually a gateway to the planet Draco to keep the portal open so that they can traverse from their planet here. And didn't you mention on your webmatrix.net that the Draco made a deal with the Germans during World War II?
Oh, yeah. That's how they were able to. Well, they were already pretty bright people, and were doing some reverse engineering, and the Viral Society was getting. Maria Orsic was getting from the Albarian constellation in the ancient Sumerian script of all things, and she gave it to her father, who gave it to Professor gave it to
Von Braun?
no, not Don Braun. Guess got a mental blank on his name, but anyway, they developed it, and they got it operational by 1934, these flying craft. The United States didn't have operational craft until 1954, so they were like 20 years ahead of us. And then when they entered into an agreement with the alliance with the Draco, then they were able to develop what's called the Dark Fleet, and working alongside with them, just like William Tompkins was saying. The Navy spies couldn't believe half of what they were reporting back, to the admiral, that they're going out into the galaxy and conquering other worlds.
That's pretty interesting. I mean,
yeah.
I guess my question would be to get kind of back into the suppressed technology aspect of the show. What do you think it would take to be able for the public to actually get access to some of this technology? Do you think it's ever even possible that this will even happen?
I think, Tommy, they've, after 10 years, the only way that technology is going to come out is if we clean house here on this planet. Once we can clean house, and then amazing things can happen. You can imagine. I mean, it's ridiculous. We're running internal combustion engines, and we have anti-gravity. People could be living remote places. I live off the grid in the mountains. I love it. I love being completely self-reliant, disconnected from all the corporate, necessities, being able to grow your own food and everything. I think everybody could have an amazing life. There's plenty of, it's not a population problem, whereas there's plenty of planets in this galaxy that could be inhabited. And there's remote places where you could have, you can generate your own food, your own power, water, everything. And you can have anti-gravity cars that can go to anywhere. And amazing, when I was a little kid in the early 1950s, I was thinking, my God, the year 2000, we're going to have anti-gravity cars and we're going to go to other planets. It's going to be incredible, and here it is, the year 2022, and we're still using gasoline. It's a situation that I think there's a certain percentage of the population psychologically that still finds it, I think it's a comfort factor, that the mainstream media, the evening news, when you're watching it, it's just too hard to believe. And that's why it's so important to understand the whole UFO topic, because when you dig deep into it, you find out the whole history of how they control everything. What happened? In fact, the event that I participated in at the National Press Club in 2001, what brought about that event? It was because President Eisenhower had to sign a surrender agreement back in 1955. And every single president, CIA director, heads of intelligence have been denied access. Maybe, George H.W. Bush access, but just about everyone has been, Kennedy 10 days before he put in a request for the files. What happened to him? Alan Dulles set up an assassination directive. Then you have Jimmy Carter, who had a UFO report that he reported, and he made it a campaign promise to reveal this information. And one of the 20 witnesses was Daniel Sheehan, an attorney, and he gave testimony that George H.W. Bush denied the sitting president access to the files. And then in 1993, Clinton wanted to have information. He was curious on the UFO matter. He had a CIA director, James Woolsey, look into it. A CIA director was denied access. And he exhausted his military and intelligence channels. And so he had to bring in a civilian, the director for the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, Dr. Stephen Greer, who in this 3-hour meeting brought a big stack of documents substantiating the reality, and the words out of the CIA director's mouth is, I know the subject's real. I'm just trying to figure out why the hell I can't gain access to it. And so Dr. Greer met with some military advisors. They decided not to collect, just a dozen witnesses, but collect hundreds of witnesses. And so from 93, which kind of interesting. From 93 to 93, and then what happened after that? Oh, in 93, I was meeting with Bob Lazar outside Area 51, along with a group of about a dozen researchers. First time I ever went public. I had my camcorder. No recordings were allowed whatsoever, so I recorded the full 2 hours and being hit nonstop with questions. His testimony has been consistent over the decades. And you can see that video at thewebmatrix.net at the 1993 timeline. But what was interesting about this meeting outside Area 51 was that it kind of freaked the base out, and so they went into lockdown, and a NRO classified advisory went out to all base personnel, to avoid these people at all costs. And on this advisory, there was a distribution list of unacknowledged special access programs, such as Magi Ops, Cosmic Ops. Somehow Dr. Greer was able to acquire this document And in 97, he met with the head of the intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Vice Admiral Thomas Wilson, and looking at these unacknowledged access programs that were reverse engineering extraterrestrial craft. And he was denied access. He was not only denied access, but as documents show that surfaced later, that he was threatened. He was threatened to back off, drop this issue, or he would see an early retirement and lose rank. And he told Dr. Greer, if you can get your witnesses together, they're willing to testify under oath, you have my permission to go to the media, mainstream media with this. This group is illegal. And so that's what brought about the 2001 event. We were attempting to warn the people of the world of these illegal operations, but they control the mainstream media, so it got sanitized.
Interesting.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tommy.
Well, I mean, we've known for a very long time that a lot of folks unfortunately met an untimely demise dealing with ufology and, or even for that matter, energy projects, things of that nature. We also know a lot of people have been bought off, things, and just you name it. But
you name
I guess,
it, yeah.
Yeah, I guess when you go back and I agree with you about the Kennedy thing, the timing there. Wasn't Jimmy Carter that I guess they came in and they had a talk with him because he was very adamant about disclosure or whatever, some form of it, or whatever that means anyway. And I guess one of his aides or someone came into the room afterwards and he was sobbing. Remember that story, Tim?
Yeah, because he was told that he could not release anything. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like they may have told him something, they gave him some information, but anyway, it upset him for whatever reason. And this is kind of a story that's been kind of going through the presidential ufology, if you will, over the years. Do you know anything about that event?
Oh, 33rd degree Freemason. They got to keep their secrets. It's interesting, the secret societies, the Skull and Bones, Knights of Malta, all these different working, and a lot of connection of, looking at the documents, like the MJ-12 documents of the Vatican coming in, wanting to have containment over the UFO issue, working with the Secretary of War, I think it was this was 1952, in order to have containment. Well, when Eisenhower had the first contact meeting with the Galactic Federation in February 1954, he wanted to go along with what they were offering. And it was Gerald Light, one of the witnesses there, that said it was his conviction that he was planning in May, just a few months later, to go on radio and television and disclose this. Another witness there was Cardinal Francis McIntyre, who broke his security oath, flew and spilled the beans to the Pope. And so what happened was MJ-12 went behind Eisenhower's back and cut a deal with the group that they were warning about, that, the Greys and the Dracos, that wanted to, for their hybrid program, abduct people, and they would get some technology back. And so Eisenhower got sold out, as General Stephen Lovkin, who was on his staff, talked about, and this probably led to, why he gave a kind of a encrypted warning message about beware of the misplaced powers and the unwarranted influences within the industrial military complex, because they had been infiltrated by the Germans. Well,
it's interesting that, I mean, our entire space program was, let's be honest, those guys were card-carrying Nazis, von Braun and the like. I mean, that's just the bottom line. We let them off of all the atrocities that they committed for their knowledge. A lot of people have a problem with that. A lot of folks that didn't make it, a lot of people that had family, they have a problem with that, and I get it. But when you look at it historically, if we hadn't used those scientists, If we hadn't grabbed them, the Russians would have, and the Russians did grab a lot of their scientists. That being said, I mean, that's how far ahead they were from us. Now, when you talk about things like, the Glock Bell and, red mercury and all the things that the Nazis were kind of playing with there, who knows where they would have gone, or what they would have actually become if they'd been given another 5 years.
Actually, Dan, they actually did come up with more, didn't they? They went off world.
True. And Truman set up this program, and these people were ardent members of the SS and so forth. That it's interesting. Dr. DeBus, head of NASA, and all these people in positions, and what happened instead of Eisenhower's planned disclosure in May of 1954. What happened in May of 1954? They set up the Bilderberg meetings by head SS Prince Bernhard, and today they still control the 6 corporations that control mostly everything you see and hear.
Yeah, I hear about the Bilderberg meetings, the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and all of them. What I would like to know is, what can you elaborate on concerning Gary McKinnon?
Oh, Gary McKinnon? Oh, bless that man. People come out that are having total recall of their secret space program service, but they don't have any proof. How are you going to prove it? Can you bring something back? Can you prove it? It's just your hearsay, right? And then what happened was this 2001 event I participated in. It inspired him to hack into the Naval Space Command computers and found the non-terrestrial officers and the USS Hillenkotter, which was the first CIA director, who warned about the secrecy, and also he was MJ1. And there was also the Lee May, who was another MJ12 member. And you have, and he saw a huge cigar-shaped craft. And the Bush administration wanted to put the poor guy away he just wanted to find out the truth for himself. He wasn't planning on doing anything malicious, but they wanted to put him away for 70 years in prison. So he didn't make that story up. And it's sort of him, along with William Tompkins, who I did a lot of research with, and did some work with Dr. Michael Salla and looking at some of his documents and connections. It turns out my father worked in the same department at Naval Air Station San Diego under Captain Rick Oboda. It was when he was a captain, and Dr. Michael Salla did some Freedom Information Act requests, and were able to substantiate many things that Tompkins was here. So here you have a documented witness that's talking about the secret space program and about the age reversal that they have. When he was working for TRW. You can take a pill, and the men become like 29 years old and the women around 20 years old. And it's interesting, when he was working at TRW, they were getting live feed from the moon in 1969, and you could see the huge reptilian or whatever they were spacecraft lying down the far side of the crater edge. And the lunar module was like this little speck compared to it. They were huge. And from what I understand, ham radio operators were, people say, oh, we didn't go to the moon. Well, how do you get a directional antenna? Myself being a ham radio operator, you can't get a high band directional antenna unless you point it at the moon in order to get the signal. And Neil Armstrong was saying, "Oh my God, these babies are huge. I tell you, there's a spacecraft lined up along the far side of the crater." But NASA said it was an overheated camera, so they cut that feed. So what happened?
I'd always heard that they'd gone to the medical channel to which was a private channel to NASA, and I guess that's why they were reporting it via that way. It's what I always heard.
Yeah, so we did go to the moon, except we were warned off.
Right, and yeah, and I do believe that we've been to the moon. That's probably something that we're going to discuss in our other channel, UFO Man, on Thursday nights. But yeah, I mean, and there's just so much as far as Gary McKenna is concerned, and that's also something, folks, that we're probably going to discuss next week on next Thursday's show. But he tells such an excellent story, and he put himself out there. I mean, the guy can't travel out of the UK. I mean, he's got all kinds of issues, legal issues, because of this. So it actually happened. He actually hacked in. And, whether or not you believe his story, I personally do. I believe he saw something that was very interesting and disturbing. Was he being fed false information? I'm not really sure about that. And Dan, do you think that McKenna could have been fed false information just to report it?
All we can say is that what we know is of a certain degree of high probability. As you research more and more, and you gather more and more evidence and more indicators, certain things have a really high probability that are most likely true. It's fairly unlikely that he hacked in and revealed the information that he did that matches all sorts of other testimonies, and that he's making it up, and he risks going 70 years in prison to tell a story like that. Now, they were really upset that he leaked that out.
I actually have a clip of him talking about what he saw. If you don't mind, I'd like to bring it up. Hold on here. Here we go.
Yeah, it was my fellow witness friend that oh God, I got a lot of blanks today. God.
Well, anyways, here's the clip.
Anyway.
But it was a proprietary NASA format.
May have to turn up your volume, guys.
So I just double-clicked one of the files, and the associated imaging software launched, and I waited, and then I waited, and then sort of line by line, very slow, very jerky, the image started appearing on the screen, but it was painfully slow. So I shut down the imaging software. I turned the color down to 4 bits, possibly 2 bits, so you get a lot less color. Turn the resolution down to, I think, 640 by 480 in order to get a look at this image as quickly as possible, low color, low resolution, and then download it, then close the connection. So I thought I had plenty of time. I thought I was going to watch this, then transfer it across. I launched the image again, and it was still painfully slow, but it was a few times faster than it was the first time round. And the top section of the image just seemed to be like a muddy sort of black and grey. But then the hemisphere of a planet started to appear, and I began to see like cloud formations. I don't remember seeing any recognizable terrain or any terrain at all. I just assumed it was Earth because it was white clouds, and the muddy darkness was obviously the space above Earth. And then the craft began to appear. First thing I saw was the top of a dome, because although it was classic cigar shaped, it had these sort of geodesic golf ball, like radar domes above and below, and no features in the craft at all, no insignia, no rivets, no seams, no sign of your standard man-made manufacturing at all. Very smooth one-piece object. Then I jumped to my seat because the mouse started to move, on its own. It obviously wasn't moving on its own. Someone who was physically at the machine had seen what I was doing, and they moved the mouse pointer over to the network icon in the system tray, right-clicked it, and chose disconnect. I couldn't believe it, as I was watching. I hadn't even seen the whole image yet, and I'd been disconnected. So that was my eureka moment, but I also lost the connection at the same time. But I had seen it, I found exactly what Donna Hare had said would be there, exactly where she said it would be, a sanitizing lab in Building 8 of Johnson Space Center that processed the imagery. And the first image I looked at featured some kind of exotic craft. So it was confirmation in my eyes. It was confirmation of Donna Hare's amazing story. I also found another piece of evidence. I think it was on a Navy network. I can't quite remember. It supports the secret space fleet theory. It was an Excel spreadsheet entitled Non-Terrestrial Officers. I don't know if that was the file name or just the title once you were in the spreadsheet. It had names, ranks, ship names, list of materiel, spelled E at the end, materiel, meaning military materials, chemicals, like exotic sounding chemicals that were under ship-to-ship transfers and fleet-to-fleet transfers. So yeah, quite an exotic document. It was almost like you found the admin office of the secret space program. Non-terrestrial officers. That I googled the phrase at the time; it was nowhere to be found. And now, if you Google it, it's just in connection with my story. That's still in my hard drive in Washington, and the office of the ONI, the Office of Naval Intelligence. I don't think I'll see that drive again.
Yep, that's the footage right there.
He's not making that up. Yeah, he was inspired by the witness Donna Hare. I think I went blank there for a second. He's a close friend. We toured, sat and had lunch with her and Commander Graham Bethune, who was an actual pilot for Admiral Byrd that flew him down to Antarctica. I found out later. But it was her testimony where she worked at NASA for 20 years. And she says, I don't know how they do it. They have people that worked here all this time. They have no idea of these secret compartments going on. Her testimony was that NASA is airbrushing UFOs out before they're releasing the public, and that the astronauts are sworn to secrecy about what happened when they went to the moon. She wrote me a private letter, not sending it over the internet, that she had her life was threatened, and she had attempts against her life, and she recently passed away. They said it was from cancer. We have a couple of witnesses like Mark McCandlish, who testified about the alien reproduction vehicles, that last year he was suicided, I believe, with a shotgun blast. And he was going to testify at the Senate hearing in June of last year about his testimony of our faster than light craft. Now, this was only 1 week after Mike Tuber comes public and says, oh, the testimony I gave 2 years earlier about the Tic Tac that everybody got saturated on the media with going back to 2017 is actually made in a Lockheed facility in California. And that can go 24,000 miles per hour and 500 miles per hour under the ocean. And he came out and said, I made the whole story up. There's nothing to it. I was just a psychological test. Very suspiciously, right? And then just 1 week later, Mark is met with, the shotgun. And so both of those testimonies, they reveal that we have technologies that have these capabilities. But in the June report, you remember last year, basically a big, as they call it, a nothing burger, that we don't have, any type technologies that are like that. So, and then you have Carl Wolf, who visually witnessed the bases that are on the dark side of the moon, and he was on his bicycle and some big truck ran him over and killed him. So, there's a lot of suspicious activity of people that have been witness to some information that is not wanting to get out there publicly.
Well, they took a shot at Bob Lazar back when he was coming forward with his story. Yeah, that was pretty bad. I mean, what are your thoughts on Bob Lazar?
Say again, Tommy?
What are your thoughts on Bob Lazar?
I believe he's totally legit. He was replaced because of another guy cut open a reactor and they needed a replacement. And he was an out of the box type of thinker. And so William Tiller saw him as, a potential candidate, for reverse engineering. Now, these operations are very compartmentalized, as you know, and you're even given disinformation. Or you worked at S4. He talked about Operation Looking Glass, but he said, oh, they can only see a couple of milliseconds into the future or past. And he said that, oh, we're unable to make any progress because it's so compartmentalized. We don't have a wealth of different minds, from different scientists being able to look at this thing, that was this Zeta Reticuli craft that was using these gravity wave amplifiers. But apparently, and you have, what's his name coming out in the New York Times, that saying that, oh, we haven't made much progress. Well, that's not true. We've made a lot of progress, and they're trying to keep that illusion going that and you have to wonder about Werner von Braun's deathbed testimony, which the next thing in line, they have this long sequence of false flags. The next one is going to be a terrorist event, which we had in September, just 4 months after we revealed that. And the next one in line was going to be rogue nations. And then we had rogue nations. We've got North Korea and Iran. And then the next one in line that hasn't happened yet is the asteroid event, followed by the alien invasion, which we've got different takes on that. I heard Randy Kramer's take on it they're going to bring in this insectoid race. It's going to look it's going to be kind of a shock and awe type of thing. But I don't know. I think, they were planning this alien invasion, looking back at the report from Iron Mountain, this is back in 1967, talking about fabricating creatures from outer space, and they were talking about how they did experiments psychologically, which they were. The Third Reich was doing experiments psychologically with the Space Brothers from Venus back in the 50s, but it actually, as you're aware of, you have, God, I'm just having a bad day of remembering names. Who was George Adamski? Yeah, George Adamski. It was like Space Brothers and Venus is actually a German craft. So they were doing all these psychological experiments, and Alan Dulles was running around telling the scientists to back off that were looking into it and trying to research. So they were all doing psychological studies on the American people.
I do have a statement that you had on your website, thewebmatrix.net. It's right here. The apparent motive for the government suppression is to protect U.S. industrial interests in the energy sector, which have been threatened by knowledge of how to draw free electrical energy from the atmosphere. U.S. corporations dominate the energy sector around the planet, and the appearance of free energy technologies would wreak havoc on their stock value. This would impact negatively on the entire U.S. economy. Is this still what they think and what they're using to control disclosure and transparency?
Yeah, it's not so much, yes, they make trillions of dollars, but, they just print whatever. They've got more money than they can possibly use. It's more about control. It's more about keeping us at a certain level so they can control the population. As you know, they're working diligently to reduce 90% of the population and have a small slave force. They have these plans that they've had in plan for a long time. But there's this because of the internet, because of shows like yours, there's this global awakening, which is their biggest fear, because the more people become aware of the game that's going on, we can transform this situation for the good of humanity versus the just the interest of the global elite that or are the one, the banking elite, and everyone's the IG Farben, the ones that funded Hitler into power. So they're all the ones that are behind the scenes that are allowing these operations to continue.
What I wanted to bring up also is this: various affiliated secret space programs. You talked about the Dark Fleet. What about Solar Warden that everybody's heard about? Are they part of the Light or part of the Dark Fleet? And the interplanetary corporate conglomerate, what is their agenda? The Global Galactic League of Nations and the various special access programs.
Well, I don't have firsthand information. I just have information from people who have been involved in the secret space program. My understanding is that there's an Earth alliance of white hats, good guys, and they're working together with the Solar Warden program. And the U.S. Navy is basically white hats that are working. The Solar Warden, in other words, they're kind of policing our solar system from, bad guys. The intergalactic corporate conglomerate is more aligned with the Dark Fleet corporate interests. It's always been toward service to self, service to the shareholders on the corporations, for imperialistic conquest. So you have those elements, but I believe that things like the Artemis Accords that were set up, that is, let's just say there's been a lot of slave labor, a lot of people have been taken off planet, and a lot of horrific crimes. You have to think about under Project Paperclip, they brought over Xavier Dorsch, which was Hitler's mastermind on the deep underground military bases that they started tunneling out in 1946 in the Manzano Mountains in New Mexico, and they have networks of hundreds of these deep underground military bases. And so they have these operations there, and they have in Antarctica, or did, from my understanding. I don't have direct information on this stuff, that a lot of these operations have been liberated and cleared out for the most part.
I've heard that too, actually. Some of them were shut down, and one of them was restarted recently, which was the Dulce base under Archuleta Mesa.
Yeah, so it's looking encouraging, and plus we got all these spectators from other star systems that are all come here for the big show of the liberation of planet Earth, and so we don't want to disappoint them, and
Right.
have a wonderful transformation of planet Earth.
I do have a question for you, and then I'll segue over to my co-host. In regards to the Draco, do they have a contingent that is based here on Earth underground?
One more time, Tim, on that.
Do the Draco reptilians have a contingent based here on Earth underground? Alex Collier mentioned that they're underground.
Oh, I'm not familiar with that. I don't know.
Okay. Tommy?
Well, I'll tell you, it's also very interesting. Certainly, you've had a lot of very interesting experiences. I would like to kind of go back, if you don't mind, though, to your UFO experience that you had aboard your ship.
Yes.
Could you sort of elaborate on that?
Oh, my military or personal?
Well, the USO encounter in 1969.
Oh, that was you. Yeah, I was just pair of headphones on and a typewriter, and the messages coming in, and I'm translating it into text, and that's the thought crossed my mind to take and make a copy on the Xerox machine, but that's like 10 years in prison, and so I passed it on, and that's the last of that. But since that time, the what is it, the History Channel, the Travel Channel did a special with me because they have called the Alaskan Triangle, and there's all kinds of activity up there. And there's speculation that there's an alien base underwater in that area because people are seeing stuff coming up out of the oceans all the time. This is back in 1969. Since that time, especially since 2017 with the Nimitz incident, people are aware that there's craft that are, and the Soviets, Soviet intelligence back then, they said more than half of the UFOs coming into our planet and leaving are coming out of our oceans.
Well, they say the most stable environment in the world is water. So for weather changes and things like that, that wouldn't affect their bases underneath the water. Plus we can't go down very deep. So they're protected if they're down at the bottom.
Yeah, out of prying eyes, out there, and there's been lots of. They've even heard that Christopher Columbus had a sighting.
Right, he did.
So it just makes sense. It'd be a logical place, and you have to wonder. Maybe you could only speculate that maybe there is a inner Earth, and there's oceans of an inner Earth. Maybe somewhere they connect together, and this is a civilization that's living inside of our planet that goes out. Kip Thorne, the astrophysicist, said that there's two natural wormholes. One's in Antarctica, and the other one's right above Alaska. And so maybe that explains why there's a lot of activity, because they're doing the jump, through the wormhole.
Well, if I were going to observe a species like ours, for instance, I would probably put a base where the humans couldn't go. And underwater is one of those areas. Tim's right. There are places that are so deep on the planet, the oceans are so deep that we just really can't practically go there. So that'd be a great place to hide one for sure.
Exactly.
And from Google Earth, you can see what appears to be disruptions on the ocean floor that look like tunnels underneath the ocean floor that have been bored out. So I almost wonder if there aren't bases underneath there that we've even helped create to facilitate alien bases or alien human bases or vice versa.
Yeah, speaking of things on the ocean floor, I found it interesting that Elena Danaan, for her Galactic Federation of World Contact Thorian, talked about that there's going to be a huge arc under the Atlantic Ocean in the Bermuda Triangle, and then Michael Salla with his contact JP then comes out a week later and says, "Oh, I went down to this arc down at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, and there's one in Ukraine on the moon, and there's others in the Pacific. They're all over the place, and they apparently the arrival of the Galactic Confederation, it's kind of like a DNA resonance or something going on." because they're kind of in the proximity, they're all like activating, and they have incredible. I mean, we're going to be discovering technologies that are so far in advance. I mean, they're filled with crystals, and I understand that they're physical in multiple dimensions because of this crystalline structure, and they even have these rooms that have this water that's being suspended in space, and they're used like for a jump room from the moon to the Atlantic Ocean to the two arcs. They're all interconnected, supposedly. I mean, I'm just following all this information. It's just fascinating. Also Linda Moulton Howe, I did a show with, the huge octagon down in Antarctica with all these hieroglyphs, and I mean, these things are massive, and it's just incredible. And they all talk about being illuminated on the inside with no visible means of lighting. And I knew Dr. Ray Brown, who was a treasure hunter in the Bermuda Triangle, that went into this pyramid, and there was a crystal that was surrounded by chairs inside the pyramid, and he took the crystal. Dr. Vogel I worked with, he was working with that, and he said that the whole room and everything, and this is under the ocean, it's filled with water, obviously, was illuminated. And so you have all these technologies that we are a long ways from understanding yet.
Tommy?
It's very interesting. I mean, there's so much that we don't know about our own planet. To think that we have any grasp of what's going on cosmically is a joke, and that's true. But I'll tell you, one of those things is just McKenna's story. That's very interesting. Maybe there's more going on than we actually do know about. Maybe there is. If that story is in fact true, Gary McKenna, then I mean that's incredible. That we're talking time travel. We're talking reverting people back and basically setting their age odometer back, if you will. Just all kinds of really, really interesting things going on there. And Tim and I think we're going to cover that a little bit more on Gary McKenna, guys, on Thursday night show, the UFO Men show. By the way, wanted to thank everybody that came out for that. That was Thursday at 9:00 Eastern time. I had a great time doing it. Next week we've got we're going to talk about Gary McKenna. We're going to talk some UFOs. We're going to have a video with that, and also we're going to be talking some paranormal. We're going to go ahead and bring our good buddy Jax on. He's going to bring his equipment on to tell us all the things that he's recorded, things that he's witnessed as far as, ghosts, poltergeists, and things of that nature. So make sure you guys come and stay tuned for that.
Yeah, Jax from Paranormal Underworld, who is currently in the chat room. So welcome, Jax. And we're looking forward to having you on next week. But I want to say this to Dan. There is so much material on your thewebmatrix.net that people should go over there and read it. It must have taken you quite a long time to compile all of that, because I've been reading all day, and I think I've only caught up on Secret Space Program and the conclusions. But a lot of that I already knew in advance, but you were more detailed. So I want to say I appreciate your content, and people should definitely go to thewebmatrix.net and check out Dan Willis's research. Very important.
It's not a professional site by any means. It was an extension of that article that company wanted me to write, and so it's just my online notes that I've been taking. And there's sections in there that I can't even talk about because we get censored.
Right. I know. Yeah.
But yeah, it's so important that everybody does their own research. You have to think about it. What if Gary McKinnon was making that up, and all these people, this long line of people all talking about 20 and back and solar warden program and all this stuff, if it's all like some great conspiracy where they're all somehow mysteriously behind the scenes corroborating in order to make up this illusionary story about the secret space program and and the Germans and what happened and everything, then we have an even more bizarre situation. And so it's so important that people understand the truth and the technologies that have been withheld that we can potentially be experiencing right now if it wasn't for their control of our perceptions in order to keep us into this agreed upon reality of where we are, where we have this incredible world on the other side of this curtain, so to speak, that once we pull that curtain fully back and realize that, oh my God, we missed out on 50, 60, 70 years or more of technological evolution that could benefit humanity. And
especially those metabeds, because if they can regress you 30 years or more to your optimal physical self, then you can extend life for hundreds of years.
yeah, there's just way too much suffering on this planet. Too many wars. I've had to go into combat action in Vietnam on the rivers because of the false flag Gulf of Tonkin event. And then all the poor guys had to go because of the other one on September that we warned about and on 9/11. And, who knows what's going to be happening here in Ukraine coming up, and we've got to stop this this negative vicious cycle that's being controlled by a group that has complete control of Hollywood, the media, our education system, and take back our planet.
That's why I say when people watch TV, mainly television, and read the newspapers, that we're being brainwashed, man, and in believing their narrative, their
Totally
rhetoric.
manipulated. Yep. Absolutely.
But we're just baseless conspiracy theorists, all three of us.
Right, that's what they say.
There's nothing to what we're saying, and so if you challenge people, say, go ahead, look at what we're saying. It's like, reminds me of this gay guy. What was Brandon? His name was. He was like a far left liberal, and a family member. It would only happen to the family member challenged him. He said, CNN's fabricating that information. No, they're not. No, they're not. And so she like dared him to look into it. He looked into it and he said, oh my God, they did fabricate that. And if they lied to you there, what else do they lie to you? And as he started to research, see, it's like the little crack in the dam that once you start to look into it a little bit, you start to see it starts to reveal itself. Otherwise, it's like it's a very uncomfortable reality to know that you're being deceived and lied to, that could actually end to your demise if you follow the instructions that they're giving on the television set. So it's just like it's like Hitler said, it's like, you don't tell a little lie. You tell such a huge, enormous lie that people they can't fathom that, such an enormous lie could be told. It just, and like Mark Twain said, it's easier to fool the people than convince them they've been fooled. So, but there's many glitches in the reality, and they try to do with their fact checkers and everything, try to do whack-a-mole, to try to hide all the bits and pieces of truth coming out. But people are catching on to the glitches in the false perception matrix.
I do have a question from the audience from Mr. Brett Elliott, and he's asking, have we reverse engineered alien technology?
How what is reverse engineered?
Have we reversed alien technology?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, there's been multiple crashes. Clifford Stone, one of the witnesses, he's been on several retrieval teams, and 57 different species. Some are carbon-based, some are silicone-based. They had a little book, a medical book, how to patch them up. They had 57 species categorized by 1989. And yeah, every time they can get their hands on something, they try to reverse engineer. But they've progressed quite a bit along with technologies. You can imagine we're getting some assistance from the Galactic Federation of Worlds, which I understand on the moon they're building like a star fleet, like in Star Trek, for us to protect in case the Draco and the Nibu come back, and that they're also building these med beds and stuff that they're going to start setting up free of cost. I don't know how that's going to work. We've got close to 8 billion people on this planet. It'd be all great if we could get back to our 20s, people who are war veterans, that have their legs and arms blown off, they should be absolutely first and have their life given back to them by being able to restore them. This is incredible technology. And what I worked on back in the 1980s substantiated that the holographic field does have an element of time that can tune through it. And so what I worked on was primitive, but it substantiated the principles of what Alex Collier was saying, is how the medbeds holographically, we are nothing but oscillations from our higher aspect into we're multidimensional, and the 3D form that we take is formed from a higher intelligence form, and that form is holographic in nature. That's why you can take a drop of blood, and within the blood, every part of your body is represented fractally in that. And that's how they're able to get a fix on your DNA and then be able to broadcast that. Randy Kramer called it the dominant harmonic resonance, or something of that nature. But it's back the stronger signal overlays on your signal, and so your body reforms, and all of a sudden you're like 20 years younger, and then they erase your memory, and then all these people coming out are talking about what they remember.
Snoopy SN101 in the chat was asking, can the medbeds repair brain injury?
Oh, yeah, like the thing in your arm type of thing. It would, I'm not an authority on it by any means. I just hear what other witnesses have who have experienced being on these beds. But it would make sense that if you could go through time where you could take an element of your body at a particular time before you had DNA damage, that you would be able to, reboot your system back to that point in time and start afresh and anew. It would seem to make sense that could happen, but I'm not an authority on that.
Right.
Yeah, very good. Well, Dan, we really want to thank you for coming out. Very interesting stuff. Everybody go make sure you check out his website. I've got his link out there on the chat. all kinds of very interesting stuff. Tim's right. You could sit there for days and read all that stuff. It's just very, very fascinating. So we want to thank you for coming out. And folks, we want to thank everybody for coming out as always, especially all you chatters out there. Hope everybody had a really good show tonight with us. And again, just remember that we're doing the UFO Men's Show, and that's going to be Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Got all kinds of good stuff that we're going to be able to do. We're kind of going back to our sort of our core roots of our show, if you will. And that's sort of why we're doing that. So we really appreciate everybody coming out. And Tim?
I would like to thank all the paid members to our channel. And here they are. Jennifer Adamek, Jeff Garvey, Mr. DB Cooper 77, Occam's Razor, Beats, Donna McFadden, Trevor Williams, Melanie Stark, April Eggerts, Kevin Slayton, Jennifer Start, and Julie Field. You can join for as low as $1.99 a month, and there are perks and cool emojis, so check it out. I want to thank you, Dan. I would really like you to come back on our channel sometime so we could go deeper.
Oh, I'd love to. I've been working so hard the last 2 days. I'm kind of like zapped, and so my brain's not fully as high speed functional as it could be. But I just really appreciate having me on. I'd love to be on again, and you guys keep up the good work. You're doing an awesome job of waking people up to the reality that the UFO matter is the key into the door that opens this.
Sure.
Right. And thank you for your research. Very appreciated.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you to everybody in the chat. Thanks to everybody who watched online, and from Tommy and myself and Dan Willis. We want to say good night.